Howdy, Banjo Ben, Jake Stockdill here at Banjo Ben's General Store. Around the table again. Today we're talking about Flatpicks. Now, we've done lots of educational videos on Flatpicks, the anatomy of Flatpicks, particular product features for certain Flatpicks. So today's not really about education. I'm sure there will be something to be learned all the way around, but rather what we prefer in our own Flatpicks and maybe the evolution that we've gone through over many years of playing to love regarding Flatpicks. So Jake, I see we have both the selection here. I've got 6 pulled out. You've got 7 pulled out. You're one better than me, and it looks like without coordination we have some overlap.
Definitely, yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is let's just trade off working through our Flatpicks and tell why we love it and maybe how we came about, because some of these you can buy, some you can't. So you go first.
Yeah. All right. So on mine, I've kind of got them lined up here just in order of price and availability. And for just a cheap pocket pick, about the best one that I've found are these Dunlop Ultex 1.14. They come in different shapes and sizes and thicknesses and whatnot. I like the triangular ones.
Yeah. Talk about why you like the triangular ones.
For me, it's a couple reasons. The most utilitarian one is you have 3 corners to wear down, because you do wear the corners down over time. So it just lasts longer. I also, something about the balance of a 3-cornered pick I like. The way one of the points extends back into my thumb, it gives me better control of the pick in a way.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
That's just me, but I also really, I can use a teardrop fairly well too. So I will actually go back and forth sometimes, and as we get further into the list, I'll talk about my preference for my ideal shape. But as far as over-the-counter pick, this feels and has certain tonal qualities that aren't terribly different than tortoise shell. You know what I mean? Like it's got a kind of a real clear front edge to the note. Not quite as much warmth as tortoise. It's a little brighter, but that can actually do really well for old dead strings.
Yeah, and certain guitars too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you made me one of those, or you took one and you customized it. And honestly, I didn't know for the longest time which pick you had made this out of. And you just reminded me that it was one of those. What did you do for this when you customized it for me?
I just slightly reshaped it for you. So for me, some of the triangular shaped picks right out of the bag, especially your, bulk picks, they're just a little too big for me.
Yeah.
I love the shape, but I like to shape them down and kind of sculpt them just a little bit more. So that's pretty much it. And then just put a high polish on it, because that's how, if you compare that to what a tortoiseshell pick feels like, it just feels more similar.
Yeah. Cool.
And you can also tell a good pick too a lot of times by how it sounds when you drop it on a table. Yeah, it's got kind of a musical ringing sound instead of just a thud or a thwack,
What's your next one?
So the next one, I used these for a very long time.
I did too.
Yeah, I remember way back when. It's what Brian Sutton and Chris Thiele and guys like that use, so I've got to have it, And I probably had this it's a Wegen, or Wegen. I'm not really sure what the pronunciation is. They're made in the Netherlands and shipped over. But they have a real good sound, a real good attack, a good feel. They've got the holes in the middle for grip. Some people call them speed holes or aerodynamics, but it's just for grip.
That's where I first came over to a triangle-shaped pick, because I'd always played with the teardrop, and I would see these large picks, large triangles, and just think, how could anybody play with those? And when I first started playing mandolin, and somebody turned me on to the black Wegens with the holes in them, I thought, well, I don't know if I can play that. It's that big triangle shape, and then that now I've pretty much stayed exclusively there with the triangle.
Right.
A few variations here and there.
Yeah.
I don't have a Wegen in the mix, although I've put many hundreds of hours on instruments with a Wegen. There's not a lot of diversity here with these picks except just material here and there. Another one that's very similar to the Ultex that you made me would be this tone slab. One difference is that it does have one rounded corner. So we've got the sharper edges for 2 of the corners, and then for the one off, more of a rounded edge. This red one, I can't remember which thickness it is. It's pretty similar, maybe a little thicker.
1.2 mil.
1.2, so a little bit bigger than the Ultex, or thicker. Pick feels great. I find myself gravitating toward the round corner for whatever reason, especially on mandolin, just a little smoother. But I dig the tone slab. What's next?
Yeah. So the next one for me is kind of a sleeper pick, I think. Not a lot of people are familiar with these yet. It's a Martin brand pick, but it's just it's a material called PEEK, P-E-E-K.
Okay.
And as you get into the world of super high-end thermoplastics like NASA uses to line bearings in space shuttles or whatever they use them for, like in situations where you need the material not to fail, this kind of falls into that quality of plastic. So raw material wise, just to give people an idea, because when you get into these more expensive picks, these are kind of middle of the road. These are about $20 a piece, so not quite as expensive as some of the other options we get to. But still yet, people are like, why is that so expensive? And like, I'll get emails all the time where they're asking me to send them the name of the material and they'll just make it themselves. It's like, okay. So you find a link for the raw material and you can get like a rod of it this big and it's like $1,800 for that rod. You know what I mean? So it's very expensive stuff. And with the real expensive thermoplastics like that, you get incredible wear resistance. And this is a lot like a blue chip in the sense that I've used this very pick for probably 6-8 months or something like that. And it's held its shape very well, similar to a blue chip. You get a little less pick noise, a little smoother attack. It doesn't, when it wears in, some of these other picks, even the Ultecs, can get a little bit scratchy. And you kind of have to buff them out. That's just a thing with certain pick materials, And if you grew up with that, you're just kind of used to it. It's not really a big deal. But there are alternatives such as this Martin pick that you don't. They're kind of low maintenance. You just play them and they just keep delivering. And the tone is nice too. I really like the tone this produces. It's like I said, it's kind of dry and just real smooth. I enjoy it.
I got my first one today.
Yeah.
That's why I included it, because I am excited to play with it. You were playing, and you recommended it, and then you took it, and I played it first, and just being honest, it had a bit too much of a bright sparkle for me. And you said, well, that's because of the machining, probably, and if you play it for a while, they'll warm up a little bit.
Yeah, and so these picks, some of the picks on the table are completely handmade and hand buffed. One of the reasons the price point is more affordable is they're more manufactured.
Yeah.
And so they have a beveled edge, but it's a machine beveled edge. And so there's tooling marks on the edge, you know what I mean? And so that kind of enhances that brightness and stuff. Once you kind of wear, like any pick too, any pick you get, even one of these right out of the box, a cheap, Dunlop pick, it's going to be brighter and clackier out of the box just because of the nature of how a pick is machined and made and punched out. If you take the time to bevel it how you prefer or just play them in, they will wear in as you play them. That's when you realize what the pick's really going to sound like, is when it kind of bevels to match your angle.
That's important to point out too, because I'm sure there's lots of folks out there, myself included, that have given a thumbs down to certain picks just because of that initial.
That first.
Yeah.
Well, even we sell a ton of blue chips here, right? And we have, someone will buy a blue chip and I'll get an email, absolutely love it, best pick I've ever had, et cetera. And a year or so later, 6 months, a year later, they want to order another one to have a backup, or maybe they're starting to wear theirs down some, because they will wear. There's kind of a myth out there, blue chips don't wear. They do, just slowly, compared to other options. But I can't count the times we've sent the person, like, I'll look up their order, and they bought a TP40, and they're like, okay, I want to order the same thing. I send them another TP40, and they swear there's something wrong with it or it's different. It's like, no, it's a brand new pick with a brand new edge. You've broken yours in, so they will sound different at first,
Right.
So yeah, it's a good thing you brought that up.
Yeah, and you took this one and you buffed it up for me, and it immediately sounded more to my liking.
Right.
So I'm excited to spend some time with it.
Yeah, it'll get even better as you play it too, because it'll form more to your style.
What's next?
Okay, the next one I included was kind of more obligatory. I don't really use these anymore, but there was a time when a Casein pick was all the rage, and tortoise shell pick in our circles is considered kind of a holy grail pick material. There's something about the warmth and the articulation all rolled up in one that you really can't.
Tortoise.
Good Tortoise. You really can't find it in any other material. There's some that come close and offer parts of that, but there's a complexity to Good Tortoise that's just hard to replicate. And so Casein,
It's a biomaterial.
it is, yeah. It's kind of like a petri dish grown version of a tortoise shell, you know. And I used them for a long time. I will say this material though isn't as, it's not, even though tonally it offers you a lot like what Tortoise gives you, it doesn't hold up like Tortoise.
Right.
You know? Like this one, even this is pretty much a brand new pick, and feel it. It's warping. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Versus these Tortoise picks on the table are really flat and straight. You know. Yeah. So those will wear.
If you stick them in your pocket, they'll get warm.
They'll draw moisture.
And then if you throw them under your strings and put any kind of stress on them, they'll warp.
They'll warp. Yeah.
And I have Tortoise do that too. I have one of my Tortoises that I've got to probably get wet and warm and flatten it out.
Yeah. The Tortoise will do it. I find that these are a little more prone to do it.
Yep, I do too.
And over time too, they'll start to like crackle and break.
Yep,
You know?
I broke mine. My only one that I bought, it wasn't that brand. Bought it and had it in my pocket. It wasn't terribly tough on it or anything, but it
crumbled on you.
Yeah, it crumbled on me.
Yeah, and they will, and that's just kind of part of it. I mean, still a good pick, still a good option. I used one for a long time before some of these other options were available, so I thought I would include it as a mention. But no matter how good the company is, this is a German company made this one, Hense maybe, Hense. I'm not sure what the pronunciation is. They make great picks, and they make other materials too. But this particular material is just prone to do that no matter who makes it, I found.
Well, let's see where you're going next. So I'm going to go ahead and include this. This is a blue chip TP1R 40. Again, 1R stands for one rounded edge. 40 is the thickness of the pick. This has got a smaller overall blueprint than some of the others that I have on the table. So for certain applications, I like it better. Seems like for mandolin, I like it a little better. Yeah. And I love going back and forth between those 2 points. Like I said before, I find myself more on the rounded corner than not. But whenever I pick up an instrument with particularly dead strings or just more of a muddy instrument, then I love going over that, having the ability to go to a sharper edge and get some sparkle out of that instrument.
Right. And that's a good point in and of itself. I've actually had some customers in the past, whereas I would recommend, like for a long time now, my favorite pick has been this tone slab, Darth Tone. I love the material, something about it. It feels like if you just kind of, which we'll do this in a second, I'll ask you to do a field test, but even how it attacks the strings, it just gives me a lot of what I want, right? And in a video not long ago, and I've been recommending these and still do. It's been, over the last year, it's been my absolute favorite pick that I use the most. But every great once in a while, depending on what guitar I'm playing, what mood I'm in, what the song requires, or even just how my hand's working that day. I don't know if you've run into the same thing, but some days a pick that you don't normally use just feels better for that day. You know,
especially when you're doing something specialized like cross picking or something like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll pick up like this big tone slab, which I don't normally play. I like the pick. If I'm doing some cross picking, all of a sudden I get much more accurate and fast with this. I'm like, what's going on? And then later that day it fades. Right. And I'm back to my other pick is what I'm most comfortable with. Right. I don't know why that happens. Just something about the mechanics of my hand at that moment.
It's the subjectivity of the human element, I think. You know, it's like we're the ones that are changing. The pick isn't changing. But yeah, I've had a customer reached out and on my recommendation, he bought this JS, and then he noticed in a video I was playing one of these. He's like, I thought you said that was the best. Well, yeah, it is. It's still my favorite. It's just on that particular day. So I said all that to make the point that these are tools, you know, and it's just like doing any other job. You know, there's some tools that's going to work better in some situations than others. And even just for you that day, you know, the way you hold your mouth while you're playing a certain song may affect which pick's going to work better for you, you know. I won't say, I don't go so far as changing my pick every song or something, but you know, I might, if I use the same one for several weeks, I might pick up one of these others, any of these others on the table, and just feel like I'm connecting really well with that one. If I find that I'm not connecting very well with one that I would normally like, you know, so.
And you've got the TP40 there.
Yeah, same as the one you just talked about. This one doesn't have the round corner. but I do have them with the round corner too. And yeah, that's a good pick. In a blue chip, that's about my preferred size and shape. It's just the slightly smaller 3-corner shape.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I typically, thickness-wise, for me personally, I like to stay around a 1.1 millimeter. That's just for me universally. Sometimes I can go thicker, sometimes I can go thinner, just like that we were talking about before with tolerance there.
Well, and not every material is the same, so
right.
not every 1.1 millimeter material will have the same sound or response.
Yes.
So, stiffness is an attribute of material as well. So you can have
friction too, like how the drag is of the material. Yeah.
I mean, to put it in extremes, you can have 1.1 millimeters of a cracker versus 1.1 millimeters of stainless steel.
Right.
And they're going to handle and feel completely different.
Right.
So it's not ultimately about the thickness; it's about the thickness paired with what material is it.
Exactly.
And what are the atmospheric conditions that day with how it's sticking in your mugs.
Oh yeah, that's a factor too. Some of these, just the surface, like the one thing we didn't talk about, the Wegen, it's got a micro fingerprint. Like if you look at the surface of it, it's just like what your fingerprints look like brushed into the pick. So that gives you a different locking surface than something like this, which just has a mirror, like stick on kind of. Yep. And they're both great. Like I grip these just totally fine, but if you're oily or sweaty, the fingerprint is far better than the really smooth surface.
So I'll go to our next one, and I'll just keep them coordinating here. This is the Tone Slab JS model. JS standing, of course, for Jack Smalley. Jake Stogdill. So this is your signature pick, right?
Yes.
And I want you to tell us why it's your signature. And although I don't think I have the Darth Tone version.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Yep. Same.
Okay. But I've enjoyed playing this here and there. I like the particular size. I like probably the things that you're going to say caused you to make it, your own.
Yeah. So where this came about, when we first started dealing in tone slabs, I got one of those red ones just like you have. And David reached out to me and asked me which one I was playing and what I liked, and I told him. And I said, I'm using this model, but I said I always reshape them to what I like. And he seemed really interested in that. He's like, well, what do you mean? And so I explained my process for doing that. Because I've always, just like we talked about earlier, this shape and size is too big and bulbous for me. It's a little too big to articulate well. And I also, on a triangular pick, I never so much cared for the really round, kind of the tip.
The sides.
Yeah,
Not the
like
points,
that.
But the sides.
Right. The point doesn't bother me so much. It's the distance between the point with this kind of curvature. And the reason for that is the way I grip a pick. I don't know if you can get this in camera or not, but for me personally, I'll lay the thumb over the top and curl my finger back like a lot of people do, but my index finger will actually tilt upward, and that creates kind of a mechanical lock on that pick. And if you can imagine, with the finger coming up and locking against the edge of the pick, if it's round like that, it's just easier to walk around, you know what I mean? Kind of like trying to balance two bowling balls or something. And so what I would always do with a pick like this, I would just sand it down, make it just slightly smaller so it would articulate better. I'd get better attack out of it, and it just fit in my fingers better with a little bit straighter edges. And that's where this come from. And the interesting thing is I've been doing this for years, and a couple years ago in a Facebook giveaway, Zane Fairchild was giving away a Wyatt Rice tortoiseshell pick. And I entered in the drawing and ended up winning. And whenever I got that pick, it was shaped remarkably similar to how I've been shaping my picks. So, I'm not the first person out there that's found that this works really well for them. Obviously, it's just a lot of people don't even really think about like how you can experiment with things, and reshape the pick. Get you a bag of these. They're cheap. Polish them, reshape them, bevel and play with them.
That's a good point.
And then you can kind of know what you like. But for me, that works really well. And I call it a tri-drop because it's a tri-cornered pick, but the actual profile as it comes down to a tip is more like a teardrop as far as the attack. And in a bluegrass band, that works really well for me articulation-wise. I just get the note out a little better, So yeah, that's the philosophy on that. And these Darth tones, it's a black Ultim PEI, which material wise, it's you can listen to it. Has a really nice ring to it when you drop it on the table.
Yeah.
But it's not too. I mean, this same material basically, but in a more translucent version, is like what astronauts use for their sun visors on their space helmets. So. It's very high wear resistant, impact resistant, stuff like that too. Yeah, these hold up great. I love them.
So the last one for both of us are the Tortoise picks. Let's talk briefly about just Tortoise in general. I hope to say everything correctly regarding laws and regulations there, because people are touchy on this subject. You can't go out and buy retail a tortoiseshell pick.
No.
They're difficult to find, and I will also say that not all tortoise is created equal. I've purchased a lot of tortoise over the years, and a lot of it I could just throw away. Some of it's the craftsmanship of the pick, and some of it's the actual shell.
Yeah, it's an organic material.
Yeah. However, without incriminating myself, hopefully, it's my understanding that repurposed antique tortoiseshell materials is totally fine to make picks out of. Right?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't it be?
Right. Yeah.
The turtle's already dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's made 100 years ago.
It's
or
made
whatever.
Yeah. And so we're not importing it. We're not killing new turtles. And it's not just any tortoiseshell. It's a specific type of sea turtle, specific to, is it Galapagos Islands, I think, perhaps, or somewhere over there.
The Hawksbill sea turtle.
Hawksbill sea turtle.
Yeah.
Somebody should have told me that. I got way into some other experimentation before I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Let's just say the terrapin population at your place went way down.
Yeah, no.
Well, this is way too porous. Why does it sound like pure sandpaper?
But the ones that I have quite a few now that I've just acquired from friends over the years, gifts and things like that. And I have some good friends that make some great tortoiseshell picks, and they'll go to estate sales and buy, combs and mirror handles and cigarette holders and hairbrushes.
This one was, if you look at it, it was made out of a hairbrush, and there was some silver inlay. That is, you still see the etching from where the inlay was in it. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's how you can know it's repurposed antique for sure.
Oh, that feels great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like feel that in hand compared to one of these, and you'll see what I mean about the similarities.
Yeah.
Like and when you're playing them too, they're just really similar.
Yeah.
The Tortoise still offers you a little bit of depth that you can't get, and it's the only thing like it.
Well, in my experience too, this is just personal opinion, that to get some of the qualities out of Tortoise that I'm looking for with another high-end pick, I have to go a little thicker. So the Tortoise is able to accomplish it with
that's a good point. Yeah.
With a lighter, thinner profile.
Yeah.
And
that's what everyone goes on about Tony and his tone. No one out there would argue Tony Rice's tone is anything less than superb.
Right.
Or even Kenny Smith, or like Josh Williams, Clay Hess, all these guys that I just mentioned, they're 1 millimeter and under guys. That's the thickness of pick they use. So you don't have to use a roof shingle, to. Right. I mean, if you do, that's great. Greer, Trey Hensley, guys like that, Workman. They use big, thick picks, and they're incredible. It's purely a personal preference. But, Tony was getting all that tone, like you said, all that full, lush, airy, fat tone, largely with a pick that was closer to 1 millimeter, which is considered kind of on the thinner end of the spectrum for most people.
Yeah.
But he was a tortoiseshell guy. That's all he used.
Yeah.
Anything else, he would claim you might as well be using a bleach bottle. So. Yeah.
So I have quite a few Tortoise that I kind of rotate my way through, and they wear down too. They need buffing.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Here and there. And it is amazing what these modern pick makers like Tone Slabs and like Blue Chip are able to create in order to get toward that standard, that Tortoise seems to offer. And not everybody's even going to agree on that.
Right.
Some people might not like any Tortoise that they play.
It's purely subjective.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the whole thing. You could ask 50 different incredible guitarists what their favorite pick is, and you're going to get 50 different answers,
Yeah.
maybe, you know, from the shape to the material to the brand to the size and thickness. I mean, and another good point with that too that I've noticed is like, you know, I mentioned Greer earlier. He's known to use a big, fat, thick, oftentimes rounded off pick, right? Like big old chunky thing. And he sounds as articulate and clear yet full as anybody. But that's, you know, his approach allows for that. If I use the same pick, or like Tommy Emmanuel, he uses a DeAndrea. It's a cheap pick. It's like $2. It's 1.5 millimeter, and it's made out of, in my opinion, one of the dullest sounding materials that you can find. Like if I use the Tommy Emmanuel pick, it just goes, you know. But for him, it works beautifully, you know, because of how he interfaces with it, the type of guitar he's playing, his setup, you know. So it's all subjective in that sense, but you know, objectively, there are some materials that hold up better. The Martin and the Blue Chip, they last really well. This one is close behind it. Then the Tortoise shell, close behind that, and then
Wegens.
actually these, yeah, and then the Casein's way down here. The Casein's on the floor as far as like how it's going to hold up compared to the others.
Yeah.
But
Very
you know,
cool, man.
yeah. So there are objective qualities to them, but how they work for you is subjective, right?
Right.
So, but
It's fun.
It
It's a
is,
fun
yeah.
little pursuit.
that's what a lot of people don't realize too. Like, it's always fun to see the lights come on for people. That's like it's kind of amazing. You'll have customers that they've got this gorgeous $5,000 guitar, and they've got a $200 capo on there, and they're using $20 a set strings, and they've just got it fine tuned to, you know, they've got a $1,500 case, and they've got a 35-cent pick in the strings, you know, and you're like, hey, try this. And after a few seconds, their eyes get like they didn't even realize a pick could make a difference, you know, after all that. And the thing is, it does make a difference. Like I said, it's subjective as to what you like, but it's worth experimenting because you might be missing something that's a really great fit for you without trying other things out there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you spend all that money in gear and guitars and strings and capos and all that stuff, even an expensive pick at $40, $35, $40, is a very small percentage of that, if it even helps a little bit, you know. So.
Yeah, I agree. If you're interested in checking out some more picks, you can always go to Banjo Ben's General Store online. And if you have specific questions about the picks, you can give us a call or an email. Store at banjobenclark.com, or give us a call at 833-BANJO-BEN. We'll share with you what our opinion is, and we'll always tell you the truth in that, that's for sure. Thanks for joining me today, Jake. And let's go try out these flat picks on some of these Santa Cruzes behind us.
Deal.
Deal.
1, 2.